11 or 2 page 82
في حلو.
okay for 2 given cosine alpha is equal to radical 2 over 4 and alpha belongs to the interval negative pi 0. Again, you have to find sine alpha and page. Okay. Negative pi 0. Alpha should belong to which interval? Yes.
يعني هي between quadrant.
عم بسمع.
بقول أنا.
تفضل ايه.
حسب السيركل هي بتكون يا بكوادرت 3 يا بكوادرت 4.
Negative pi is here. نرجع ونذكر بشغله. Every quarter you move pi over 2. In case you have negative, you move in the clockwise direction. In case positive, you move in the counterclockwise direction. Okay. So here you have 0. Negative pi over 2 will be here. Negative pi here. Negative 3 pi over 2. Negative 2 pi. Negative 5 pi over 2. Negative 3 pi and so on. In case you have positive, you move in the counterclockwise direction. Pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, 2 pi, 5 pi over 2, 3 pi, and so on. Right. So between negative pi and 0, 0, negative pi is here, negative pi is 0, so in quadrants 3, 4. Continue.
Yes. And given إنه الكوساين alpha equal radical 2 على 4.
Okay.
والradical 2 على 4 هي bigger than 0 and this implies alpha belongs to quadrant 4.
Bravo. So here alpha belongs to quadrant 3 or 4 according to this interval. But cosine alpha is radical 2 over 4, which is positive. That means that alpha belongs to quadrant 4. أيوة. Continue.
اوكي لا نجيب الساين. عندنا رول بتقول cosine to power 2 alpha plus sine to power 2 alpha equal 1.
Good. Sine squared alpha.
We replace cosine alpha
equal to 1. Then
we replace cosine alpha يعني equal radical 2 على 4 كلها to power 2 plus sine to power 2 alpha equal 1.
you replace cosine alpha by radical 2 over 4. So you get sine squared alpha plus radical 2 over, and so sine squared alpha plus
sine squared alpha plus 1 على 8.
radical 2 over 4 squared, it is 2 over 16, which is 1 over 8. Is equal to 1. Then sine squared alpha is equal to 1 minus 7 minus 1 over 8, which is equal to 7 over 8. Good.
يعني
so
sine to power 2 alpha 7 over 8. To remove the power we نعملها radical.
you apply radical.
يعني sine alpha equal radical 7 على 8 أو radical 14 على 4 or alpha equal negative radical 14 على 4 أو negative radical 7 على 8.
Sine alpha equal negative radical 7 over 8. Okay. طيب. But alpha belongs to which quadrant?
But alpha doesn't belong. But alpha in quadrant 4 يعني belongs to
الصوت عم بيعطش شباب، مش عارف إذا من عندك ولا من عندي.
لا أستاذ، أنت كمان كتير إيدك إنه يعني بدها وقت كتير لتوصل على اللوح.
بتروح على slow motion. Okay, continue.
إيه. And this implies sin alpha equal radical 7 على 8.
لا, negative.
Negative radical 7 على 8.
Which is equal to negative radical 14, all of it over 4. Good.
14 على 4. Yes. So to get the tangent, tangent equal cosine alpha على sin alpha.
Tangent alpha is equal to sine alpha over cosine alpha. And you already have sine alpha and
يعني equal
cosine.
radical 2 على 4. Yes.
ايه
radical 2 على 4 كلها على radical 14 على 4 يعني equal radical 7 على 7.
صباح الخير.
يسعد صباحك. بالعكس يا ربال. Radical 14 over 4, negative radical 14 over 4, over radical 2 over 4.
ايه استاذ؟
انت قلت لي اياهم بالعكس.
يس. ايه بعرف.
Over radical 2 over 4. The answer is negative radical 7.
يس.
استاذ your screen black ما عم بقشع شيء.
عند الكل؟
إيه هلا مش على الحل.
اوكي. شو يا دانيال؟ بعد محاولات حثيثي لحتى مشي الحال وعملت جوين. دانيال Eva left the meeting.
استاذ بس سؤال.
تفضل.
كيف جبنا الماينس راديكال 14 على 4؟
You can rationalize or you can use the calculator. Like he, in fact, without using the calculator, it's negative radical 7 over radical 8. Radical 8, it's 2 radical 2. Radical 8, he 2 radical 2. Simply can write it 4 times 2. Radical 4 to 2. Then rationalize, multiply by radical 2 and here by radical 2. So you get negative radical 7 by radical 2, it's radical 14. And here, radical 2 times radical 2 is 2. Again, radical 2 times radical 2 is 2. 2 times 2.
اوكي. اوكي. Thank you.
Welcome. Are you done?
Yes.
May I erase? Part 3.
استاذ may I solve it?
Yes. Tangent alpha is equal to 2 and alpha belongs to pi over 2, 3 pi over 2. Here we are going to solve it in 2 ways. أنا بعطيكم رول جديدة كمان relation or two more relations, one for the tangent, one for the cotangent. Okay, this is the second way we are going to solve it. Or the first way, yes, Lean.
Yes. Okay, أول شيء alpha belongs to quadrant 2 or quadrant 3 according to the interval.
Pi over 2 is here, 3 pi over 2. So quadrants 2, 3. Alpha belongs to quadrants 2 or 3.
Yes.
Continue.
But tangent to alpha is equal to 2, which is greater than 0. Alpha belongs to quadrant 3.
Tangent alpha is equal to, which is positive, so alpha belongs to quadrant 3. Now, in quadrant 2, tangent is negative. Continue.
Okay. Tangent to alpha is equal to sine alpha over cosine alpha, equal to 2.
Okay.
Then sine to alpha is equal to 2 cosine alpha.
Bravo. So tangent alpha, it's sine alpha over cosine alpha. So sine alpha over cosine alpha is equal to 2. That means that sine alpha is equal to cosine alpha. Just one moment before you continue. Here, she is trying to move from tangent to sine and cosine. Why? Because the only relation you know is sine squared plus cosine squared is equal to 1. The only relation till now, you know it, is sine squared alpha plus cosine squared alpha is equal to 1. حلو انتوا بتعرفوه. relation that contains sine and cosine. هون بدها تخلص من شيء اسمه tangent راحت على شيء اسمه sine و cosine. اللي هن terms or the functions that you already have a relation between them. Okay, continue please.
Okay. Another rule اللي نحن بنعرفها إنه sin squared alpha plus cosine squared alpha equal 1.
Good. Now sine squared
Okay,
alpha
so
plus cosine squared
I
alpha.
replace sin squared alpha.
Now replace sine alpha by.
I replace sin alpha by 2 cosine alpha.
Good. We replace sine alpha by 2 cosine alpha. So you get 2 cosine alpha squared
Squared.
plus cosine squared alpha is equal to 1. And then?
So 4 cosine squared alpha plus cosine squared alpha equal 1.
Bravo. 2 cosine alpha squared. It's 2 squared. Here we have multiplication. It's 2 squared times cosine squared alpha. So 4 cosine squared alpha plus cosine squared alpha is equal to 1. So here 4 cosine squared alpha plus cosine squared alpha بتضل. Now 4 cosine squared alpha plus cosine squared alpha. Continually.
5 cosine squared alpha equal 1.
So 5 cosine squared alpha is equal to 1. And then cosine squared alpha.
Then cosine squared alpha equal 1 over 5.
1 over 5. And so صرنا هلا مثل الاكسس.
Then cosine alpha is equal to plus.
Then cosine alpha is equal to
Plus or negative radical 1 over 5.
positive, negative, radical 1 over 5. But
alpha belongs to quadrant 3.
very good. Alpha belongs to quadrant 3. So cosine alpha
is negative 1 over 5.
negative radical 1 over 5,
5.
which is negative radical 5 over 5. Good.
Yes.
Now here we found cosine alpha. What about sine alpha?
We have the tangent وجبنا الcosine, so we can get the sine.
Or from this relation?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Type. So now sine alpha
is equal to 2 cosine alpha.
is equal to cosine alpha. So it is equal to negative 2 radical 5 over 5. Negative 2 radical 5 over 5. Okay? Or if you want, اللي مش عجبته هيدي, sine alpha equal to cosine alpha. أول اللي ما انتبه له. From this, tangent alpha is equal to 2. Replace tangent alpha by sine alpha over cosine alpha. You have cosine alpha. Replace it and then find sine alpha. Okay? This is the first way. We have another way. I'm going to give you another relation. In fact, we have 3 Pythagorean relations in trigonometry. The first one is this: sine squared plus cosine squared equal 1. We have another one with tangent, another one with cotangent. هلا بعطيكم إياه. ريان. ريان.
نعم أستاذ.
أستاذ ليش كل مرة أنت تفوت مؤخر أصلا؟
أستاذ ما كنتش بالبيت، ما كانش في إنترنت كمان. كنت عم بعمل فحص أستاذ.
خير. Okay, are you done? May I erase?
Yes أستاذ.
بالنسبة لي أستاذ
Yeah.
أستاذ سبق تعطينا الطريقة الثانية.
إيه.
أستاذ
نعم. نعم. مين كان عم يسأل؟
أستاذ
نعم.
أستاذ عم تسمعني؟
هلا عم بسمعك. ايه. شو عندك مشاكل كثير بالانترنت لأن عم بشوفك عم تطلع ترجع تعمل جوين من جديد. ما بعرف إذا عم تسمعني ولا لا يا دنيال.
أستاذ اللي كان عم يحكي دانيال.
بعرف دانيال، ما قلت ما بعرف إذا بتسمعني منيح يا دانيال.
أنا سمعت قلت له يا بديع.
طيب. Second way, of course we are going to use this, but for the relation, the new relation. 1 plus tangent squared alpha. It's equal to 1 plus tangent squared alpha plus sine squared alpha over cosine squared alpha. It's sine squared over cosine squared alpha. طبعا كيف اجت هي tangent squared alpha يعني مثل ما اتفقنا هي tangent alpha all of it to the power 2. Tangent that is sine over cosine, so sine alpha over cosine alpha, all of it to the power 2. Now we distribute the exponent, so sine squared over cosine squared. So here, in case we have any other power, tangent شو ما يكون tangent power 5 alpha, it will be sine power 5 alpha over cosine power 5 alpha. Okay. Now to simplify this, take common denominator. So it is equal to, here we have over 1. Over 1. Multiply by cosine squared alpha. And here also multiply by cosine squared alpha. Common denominator. So it will be equal cosine squared alpha plus sine squared alpha over cosine squared alpha. بس ريمارك صغيره بطريقه الكتابه حتى ما اشوفها بعدين معكم، هو رح اشوفها يعني عند البعض بس انه ننبه عليها سلف. When you take common denominator please بنكتبه مره واحده. هذا الدينومينيتور اللي هو cosine squared alpha you write it only one time. يعني ما بدي اشوف حدا بكره كتب لي اياهم هيك cosine squared alpha over cosine squared alpha plus sine squared alpha over cosine squared alpha. شو اسمه common denominator؟ طبعا بدي اتركهم two fractions. لا ولا احنا بناكل two fractions عنده نفس الدينومينيتور. تخيلوا شو بدي اكتبهم هيك؟ ما اسمه common مشترك common denominator. denominator واحد one common denominator. Okay so you don't write in this way خلص بكتبهم هيك which is equal to cosine squared alpha plus sine squared alpha. شو الانسر؟
1.
So 1.
1 على cosine to power 2 alpha.
1 cosine squared alpha. This is a rule, memorize it. 1 plus tangent squared alpha is equal to 1 over cosine squared alpha. Hi, you can memorize it. In the same way, 1 plus cotangent squared alpha, it's 1 over sine squared alpha. Also, it is a rule. You can apply it. Once tangent is defined, once cotangent is defined. When cosine alpha is not equal to 0 and here when sine alpha not equal to 0. Okay? How فيكم تطبقون؟ وطبعا هي it's equivalent to say take the reciprocals. 1 plus tangent squared is 1 over cosine squared. Reciprocal. So 1 over 1 plus tangent squared. 1 over 1 plus tangent squared alpha is equal to cosine squared alpha. And here 1 over cotangent, or 1 over 1 plus cotangent squared alpha is equal to sine squared alpha. Okay? How? Rules. طالما هلا انتم اخذتوهم فساعة اللي بدك فيك تستعمل من دون ما اسالك انه كيف جبتها، خلص اعتذروا. مثل هيدي الرول ساين سكويرد بلس كوساين سكويرد از 1. اوكي؟ ما حدا بيسالك كيف ليش هتستعملها، هيدي الرول انت اخذها، نفس الشيء هلا هودي صار فيك تستعملهم كرولز. ماشي؟ طيب. Back to this. You need to find sine alpha and cosine alpha. طيب you have tangent alpha. تطبق هاي اللي هي ذاتها هيدي. I can say that cosine squared alpha is 1 over 1 plus tangent squared alpha. You have tangent squared alpha, replace. تطلع ب 1 step. بيطلع الانسر ب 1 step. Okay? Like, write it in order to find cosine alpha in the second way. Done?
Yes.
بعد في حدا عم يكتب قبل ما محي؟
لا.
Okay. So again, I'm going to apply one of these two, okay, to find cosine squared alpha. So cosine squared alpha is equal 1 over 1 plus tangent squared alpha rule. Hello, we just mentioned it. So there's 1 over 1 plus tangent alpha is 2, so tangent squared alpha is 4. So you get 1 over 5. اللي كنت عم تجربي تعمليها لين انه وصلت لهذا الستep طلعت معنا بستep واحد.
Yes.
يمكن طبعا مش عم بقول لك انه شو عملتي يا لين هيك لازم اكيد انت ما كنت تعرف هذه الرول واللي عملتيه كثير منيح بالعكس بدل انه في واحد عم يجرب يحل عم يعمل اناليسيس عم يحلل عم يشتغل بيفكر باللي عنده اياه. طيب سو كوساين سكوير الفا از ايكوال تو 1 اوفر 5 خلص بتكمل مثل اللي اشتغلناه قبل شوي. Then cosine alpha is positive negative radical 1 over 5, so here second step or second way. But cosine alpha or alpha belongs to quadrant 3. It means that cosine alpha is negative radical 1 over 5, which is negative radical 5 over 5. طيب هلا to find sine alpha, tangent alpha equal 1 over 2, sorry. Tangent alpha is equal to, that means that sine alpha over cosine alpha is equal to, you have cosine alpha, replace sine alpha is equal to cosine alpha, which is equal to 2 into, or negative 2 radical 5 over 5. Okay? The same thing if you are given here cotangent alpha. If you have cotangent alpha. But in case you have cotangent alpha, you use the second rule. Sine squared alpha is 1 over 1 plus cotangent squared alpha. Okay?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, still.
Are you done?
Still.
Okay. I'm going to move to the problems. Problem number 1, page 83.
استاذ فيه بلش فيه.
هلا اشتغل. بس بدي اعطي remark صغيرة. Problem number 1. Prove the following identities when they are defined. Part 1. And here there's a typing mistake. Cosine squared x minus cosine squared y is equal to sine squared. عندكم مكتوبة x. على الكتاب مكتوب x. It should be y. Okay? Minus sine squared كاتبين y هي لازم تكون x. طيب انتبه للشغله. To prove an identity, to prove an identity. هون رح نختلف أنا وياكم كتير بالنسبة لطريقة الكتابة. The way you write your solution. يعني مثلا بيجي واحد بهيك بيقول لك take sine squared x to the left side. Take cosine squared y to the right side. Then you get cosine squared plus sine squared, which is 1. And sine squared y plus cosine squared y is equal to 1. So 1 equal 1. أنا بالنسبة لي بحطها غلط. Because when you have to prove an identity, it's not given equal to use it. ما عندك اياهم ايكوال لحتى انت تجي تستعملهم تجي تاخذ لي اياها على الليفت سايد وهيدي على الرايت سايد. ما عندك اياهم ايكوال. مثل مثلا geometry بيقول لك prove that I is the midpoint of AB. شو انت بتجي بتقول له والله IA is equal to IB. يا اخي مين قال لك IA is equal to IB؟ You have to prove it. لا, you have to prove it. You can't use it unless you prove it. You can't use this equation unless you prove it. وهذا هو السؤال. Prove it. Prove that this is equal, the left side is equal to the right side. So when you have to prove an identity, you have to start from one side to get the other side. Yeah. You start from the left side, you write it. You write the left side. You do some simplifications. I don't know. Depends on the exercise itself. Depends on the given. شو بتعمل ما بعرف. Okay. على حسب كل وحدة. Unless you reach or until you reach the right side. يعني تبلش من هون بلا 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 وصلت على الرايت سايد اوكي يعطيني معناتها هذه صارت it is proved. Or the opposite, you start from the right side, you write it again, you do some simplifications, some steps, again depends on the identity you have to prove, until you reach the left side. Okay. This is another one. The third way, you start from both sides. You start from both sides. Yani you simplify the left side. We got an answer. I start from the left. Is equal to blah blah blah. I get something. And then, which is not the right side. And then you start from the right side. Is equal to blah 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 equal same something. Okay? How is it? These two are the same. Then these two are the same. Okay? So again, if you start from the left side and you simplify, you get certain expression. And if you started from the right side, you simplify, you get the same expression. That means that the left side is equal to the right side. This is another way. Okay? Way of writing, not way of thinking. بس اللي مش مقبول اللي مش مسموح فيه انه تيجي تاخذ مثلا هاي من الليفت على الرايت، تيجي تاخذ من الرايت على الليفت، او تيجي تعمل cross product or whatever. Way of writing it is not accepted. Okay? طيب.
طيب استاذ فينا نعمل فاكتورايز على
اعمل اللي بدك اياه، ما حدا له معك. تعمل اللي بدك اياه، ما حدا له معك، علشان طبعا ستيب يصح. طيب وما حدا قال انه والله اذا عملت فاكتورايز on certain step you did it انه will give you an answer or will lead to an answer. يمكن احيانا انت ستيب اللي عم تعملها اوكي صح بس ما بتنفع بشيء. اوكي؟ بالايدنتيتي. فهودي بدنا نكتر حل منهم لانهم مزعجين باي ناحيه باي شغله، لانه كل اكسرسايز له طريقته، كل ايدنتيتي له طريقته. وحده بتعمل فاكتورايز، وحده بتعمل راشنالايز، وحده بتاخذ كومن دينومينيتور، وحده you apply the identity, Pythagorean identities, but you know sine squared plus cosine squared. So it depends on the expression. فمشان هيك بدنا نكتر exercises. يعني هون we have 4 examples here or 4 parts which is not enough. فأكيد رح ناخذ extra exercise. طيب I'm going to start from one of the slides. I'm going to start from this. Cosine squared alpha or cosine squared x minus cosine squared y is equal to. طيب شباب صبايا بعطي عنا دقيقة واحدة ليخلص الميتنج أو أقل، ومش كافي لهيدا. ف I'm going to end the meeting now and start a new one. Okay؟ حطوا ما نقطش exercise notes.
اوكي استاذ.